It's the conversation. It's the conversation. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Let's go. Let's go. No filter, no restrictions. You about to give my opinion in its purest form. So my words, don't try to spin them. What I said is what I said. And what I said, I meant it. The gloves are off now when I'm coming out swinging. So engage in verbal combat, but you better be ready. Cause this here for me is light work, even if the topic's heavy. I'm ready for it all with no running from nothing. You just take the time to digest what I put in, no rushing. But time is moving, don't waste it. You want the real, come and face it. Come sit and talk to me if you want it straight without a chaser. And it might burn a little when you step on up to taste it. But it's nothing harsh, I promise. Just a little conversation.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to November's edition of The Conversation. We've got one more month left in the year for The Conversation Show. Just letting you know ahead of time, in 2024, we're going into bigger, badder things. We're going to have a wider range of casts. We're going to have different segments that we're going to be introducing. Of course, we're going to keep everybody's favorite segment, Dave's Take on Ukraine. But hopefully that segment won't be going on for the entire year and we can get rid of it because that situation will be done. Hopefully. But today we're got a lot to talk about. We're going to do our year in review with our guests that we've had on. Some of the favorite guests that have, two of our favorite guests that have been on this show, which is Mark Jones and Larry, we've invited here to do this episode in November. One of the biggest things that are in the forefront that we'll just get into right now is we got a presidential election coming up in a year. It's a year away, right? Everybody excited? Woo!
Done time fly.
This is the most exciting I've ever seen. The crowd of people when we talk about presidential election.
It never ends.
It never ends. So we'll start off with the topic that was asked at the top of our viewers is, how do you feel, and we'll start with Ukraine and Russia because that's been going on longer than what's happening in Israel and Gaza. How do you feel the U.S. has handled what's been going on in Ukraine over the last year? I'm going to end with the expert here, Dave. He hates when I say he's the expert, but we'll start with you, Larry.
Well, I feel that the U.S. has handled it fairly poorly. I do believe that if we were going to help Ukraine, we should have given them the weapons that they needed, not money, but weapons that they needed early on, and given them the chance to get in there and really start doing some stuff, use some good weapons. But, we were so afraid about antagonizing people. These are people that you can't antagonize because they're already that way. But I just feel that, we should have gone in there with both feet. Not on the ground, just with weapons.
Okay. Mark, what about you?
I don't know. I think you have to have more knowledge than I do to really get down in the weeds on this and say, have we done enough or too much? And unfortunately, we always have a way of making everything a partisan issue. I didn't think that would happen with Ukraine, but unfortunately it has. But honestly, I don't know. Maybe our first guest was right there. We haven't done enough. But I also wonder, if we had done more, would Russia not be in the Ukraine anymore? I don't know if no matter what we did, if it would really put a quick end to things. So I'll wait for kind of weightier minds to weigh in on some of the details on that. But I don't know how much more the Biden administration really could have done. But I could be wrong.
And I ask you guys first is because, hey, everybody on here represents different people in America. There are people who are heavily more invested in the weeds of what's going on, and there are people who casually tune in, and there are people who just don't know. So, but everybody still has an opinion, no matter if they're in it deeply or casually watching. So there's someone out there who are thinking along the lines of how you're thinking, and that's why it's important to ask everybody. Harold, what about you?
Well, not being that having the military level of intelligence that I would need to give a really concrete response. What I will say is I'm sure in situations like this, there's some things we could have done very differently. Some things we should have done that we didn't do, and some things that we did that we maybe we should have done or given second thought to. But at the end of the day, I want to trust those who we've have in position of military leadership for most of the decisions that they made that are in the best interest of not just the United States, but um, the global network of countries as well. Because I think the most important thing for me is I'm glad that we're not sacrificing or having our own soldiers sacrifice themselves in this particular conflict. Because at the end of the day, you know, it does impact us. It does have a global impact, but more importantly, I don't want to endanger our soldiers unless it is extremely necessary in doing so. So, with that, like I said, I just think that most likely there's some things that could have been done differently, and possibly should have been done differently. But more importantly, I'm just glad that we're not losing American lives, in this particular, again, I guess you could say Eastern European conflict.
Well, if I may, first off, I mean, I'd echo that 100%. And I think the likelihood of the American military directly engaging Russian troops is very, very unlikely, because you're talking World War III scenario there. But there is some precedent in history. We're all old enough to remember the Cold War, and every
Mhm.
time the Soviet Union moved on, whether it was Afghanistan or Poland or Hungary or Czechoslovakia, the question was, hey, what can we do? And it turned out in a lot of cases there were some things we could do. In some cases, there simply was not much we could do.
And we also have the great knowledge and ability to have hindsight, right? We've seen what's happened up to now, so it's easier for us to gauge and dictate what should have happened and what should have not happened.
Right.
But we know presidents don't make military decisions, right? They have a panel of military advisors that aid them in making their decisions. Well, that's when you listen to your advisors, but that's a whole nother topic. Dave.
Well, I think, you get into this thing, and I think you mentioned hindsight. You've always got to go back to where you have decisions and, what you knew or thought you knew at the time. And, in some ways, before the crisis, the United States leaned very far forward in to the point of pissing off some of the security guys with how much intelligence we were sharing about Russian moves, and we were very much pushing, and we were the Ukraine hawks, and to the point that I thought Putin was going to chill out and leave us looking like idiots, but then he did exactly what we said. So in the run up to it, the U.S. is very much there. As you get in, everyone's convinced, hey, Russia's going to roll over these guys, because we have this period of time where we have to realize how much the Russians suck, right? That's what we didn't have in hindsight. Just intensely how crappy they are. Everyone is shaking their head and updating and going, no, they can't be this bad. So it's a while before that information gets taken over. Um, and you start going, oh, well, Ukraine actually can defend itself, right? And so we can support them, and they'll have time to make use of things. And so I think you have this evolving understanding at any given point in time. I would say, because I followed it so closely, I can look back and go, when was I pissed off, right? When was I saying, no, we got to do this? I would say about the tank debate, right? The tank debate that went on when, oh, are we going to give them battle tanks? And the U.S. is like, well, we can't give them M1s because they're too hard to maintain, because that's how we roll. And, we had all that bullshit. And I think we wasted 4 months there, right? If there was a period of time when I think we could have done something more, I think in retrospect, we could have given them more stuff to have them better prepared for this last summer, right?
Mhm.
Now, and if we could have had them launch their attacks earlier, I don't know, before Russia laid the last 10 million mines they laid, Really the story of this summer and the stalled offensive was Russia was just too damn prepared, right? For that offensive, they laid way more mines than anyone thought they were going to lay, and that just gunked up the works. And um, maybe if you could have moved the start date of that offensive up a few months, you might have had something different happen. Um, other, I don't know, and now we're giving ATACMs. I think that we could have helped. I don't know it would have made that much difference because in the end, we do have some big fundamentals, right? Russia is just a big, as stupid as they are a big military machine, and they're there, right? Once they're there, they're hard to get rid of. But in general, I'm going to say I think the U.S. and don't forget, it's not just the U.S. It's NATO, right? What are we doing with NATO? Are we not making this a U.S. war? Are we not making this? And so NATO had to come on board. Germany had to come on board. And that I think the U.S. did a very good job of being in step with NATO. And honestly, looking from the U.S. point of view, another thing that we want to consider is what is the U.S. true core U.S. national interest, right? Are we really ride or die with Ukraine, or is our greater interest with NATO and securing NATO and not tipping that apple cart over? And if that is the bigger issue, I think the U.S. has done very well to play nice, to be a reliable partner, and to show, even to the point of giving the cluster munitions, right? Everyone this summer, oh, we're going to give cluster, and the European nations who have this treaty against it are like, yeah, we don't like this, and everyone's like, cracks in NATO, cracks in NATO, and I'm like, no, we're sending our NATO allies a message that when a friend of ours is in trouble, we will piss people off and give them the weapons they need, and every one of you frickers in NATO should be going, we are going to say that we don't like you doing this, but we really will want you to do this for us someday. So maybe we're okay with it at a core level of what is the U.S. shown that it will do. And so that's another thing I think that kind of dodges or it moves the question over, because that I think is very important for the U.S. to keep in mind, that our interests in Ukraine's are not perfectly aligned. They are aligned, but they're not perfectly aligned. We have more interest in NATO and other things that we have to keep our eye on.
Well, to one of the points that you said, the U.S. did do a great job of making it not seem a U.S. Because anytime we usually get involved, it becomes overshadowing. Now it becomes the United States problem, whether it's Kosovo or anywhere else, right? So I do agree with you to that sentiment of we did a great job. Maybe we're learning to make sure everybody else is equally involved, so it's not just looked at as, hey, it's the U.S. and they're involved and so on. But one of the things Larry said, and we talked about this earlier, I want to bring up because people will bring this up a lot, providing aid financially to other countries when they're going through issues. They're like, the common thing that's always said is, we've got enough problems here. Why are we sending money there? That's a polarizing topic. And how do you feel about that? Larry, I don't know how do you feel, but the audience doesn't know how you feel. So you guys can tell me how you feel about giving aid financially and why you think it's important to do that or not important to do that. Larry?
Well, I believe that financial aid to countries during wartime, uh, I think if we were going to do that, there has to be a whole lot more controls over how it's spent. And we don't pay attention to what they do. We don't control it. That's why, I'm for if we have weapons we can give them to help, give them the weapons, give them what we've got, because we know what they're doing with that. But just throwing money at something, I mean, we can't throw money at our own problems. It just doesn't work. But anyhow, that's just my opinion.
I got you. Everybody's opinion is worth something, Harold.
No, and I feel the same way. You can't just throw money at it. But if I'm not, if I'm not misunderstanding what I've been either led to believe or been informed of, is much of what we have been giving has been from our stockpiles of weapons more so than monetarily. Now, I don't know where our reserves are with respect to the stockpiles of weapons that have been given, and where we are as far as those resources being depleted. But now we may be writing those checks or paying our contractors to produce these weapons that are being sent over. Whatever the case may be. I'm missing that particular piece, but no, I
I
would
help you
not
on that
agree.
piece because me and Dave
Yeah,
talked about it before. Uh,
right.
when you have stockpiles of munition and some of it starts to get outdated, it costs more to get
Hmm.
rid of those munitions. And Dave,
Exactly.
correct me if I'm wrong, than to give it to someone else.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the cluster munitions that were all like, a jar of pickles in your grandmother's refrigerator. If they weren't expired, they were about to be. And instead of having to dispose, well, the clusters, those are really hard. You have to dismantle them, and
Right.
no, let's shoot them off at the Russians. Yeah, much better plan. Uh, although I do say, keep in mind, this is where the European allies and our the internet the international community has done much more in terms of providing. They've been providing money. We have provided money, but we provided more weapons, right? Because that has been something the president could do without Congress. And we are not providing money now. We are now not giving money that would, the whole budgeting thing stopped another tranche of money to Ukraine. And our European allies may be the ones that have to pick up the money side of things. Definitely, they're going to need to do that if as these things, if the U.S. is not getting support for sending money to Ukraine, somebody's going to have to.
Yeah, because it's never going to be just weapons. I mean, the financial part is going to have to be picked up tab by
Well, their
someone.
economy stopped, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they need. There is a point where you're you could just throw food at starving people, right? I mean, that's the thing. Does that work? And we're an economy that's on the skids. Um, Liquidity and cash flow can be very important, almost as important as the weapons. But like I said, we got the Swiss for that. We got a lot of people that can give some money and let them do that part of it.
Harold, do you remember what you were going to say before I chimed in with the munitions part?
Yeah, no, well, no. What I was going to say is I'm not sure exactly where we are with respect to our level of musicians that we're, removing from our reserves to donate to or give towards this particular military conflict. So, that part again, that's not my level of expertise. So I rely on my fellow panelists to enlighten me as well.
Mark, you have anything to add on this
Well, I
particular?
like what Larry said about there should be, if possible, controls over how the money is spent. All right. Um, I reject what a lot of people say because this is said about everything. That
Uh-huh.
why are we spending money on X when we have these problems at home, when we have poor people, et cetera, et cetera. We have homeless vets, all the social problems. I've been hearing that since the '60s when it came to the space race. That we're putting a man on the moon, but we have starving people in America, and that's bad. I'm not saying it's not, but uh, with all the money we're sending to the Ukraine and wherever else, it is not going to adversely impact the life of anybody here. And it sounds like a lot of money, sure, but really in terms of the federal government, it's almost like pocket change. You can decide whether or not we should be spending the money in the first place, whether it's in our interest. But as far as whether or not we're going to have starving people as a result of sending aid to the Ukraine, no way. It just doesn't compute.
Well,
Amen.
when you
Amen.
say that the the officials are telling us that it's pocket change, but keep in mind that these are the same military people, and I use that term loosely, that John Kirby especially stood up there in front of everybody and said that he saw absolutely no chaos during Afghanistan withdrawal. Now, I mean, how can you believe what a man like that says? And he's supposed to be an admiral.
Well, you know what? It also defines what is your, so these are the things with words. What is chaos to you may not be chaos to
Yeah.
someone else. So what do you determine as chaos? I could be talking about how the troops were withdrawn logistically. Was it a clusterfuck, or were they withdrawn appropriately? I could be talking about, was it a chaos financial? So it's like, what does he mean by he saw no chaos? You could take that in so many different directions when someone says that.
Yeah,
Now,
I'd want some
that's not
context.
me disagreeing with you, Larry. I'm just saying the context is important. But what's going to happen is, we all know how this happens. You say a statement, and you have 735 outlets that take that statement, and that statement is going to be projected whichever way that station or that outlet or that person sees fit. So again, that's not me disagreeing with you. It's just, what does he mean by he saw no chaos?
Well, I agree, John. And the thing that's making the rounds on social media nowadays are videos of how happy life is in the Ukraine, and the idea being that they don't need our assistance. Look how good things are there. Well, they show some people having a party or something like that. And they think, well,
You get a different social media than I do.
But
No,
I wonder
but,
about your life choices.
But Dave, I know the videos he's talking about, and that's almost
But I'm saying it's become a partisan issue where, okay, and we it's like a lot of other things. It took us a while to kind of get sorted out where we stood, and now it's Republicans are anti-Ukraine aid and Democrats are pro-Ukraine aid, and I just think it's unfortunate that it seems to always boil down to that. You stake out a position, and whether you really believe it or not, this is where I stand, and I'm sticking to it.
You just brought up something that's a whole nother show that we can do, when whatever side of the fence you are, left, right, conservative, progressive, Democrat, Republican, it's always crazy to me when talking politics that if you cold-heartedly believe in one thing, you have to say you believe in the other thing to stay in line with your party or what side of the fence you're on. And that to me, that's just madness.
It is.
But that's the way the game is played.
That's why they have an independent party.
Yeah, but they ain't got enough money, so.
I hear. They got a lot of people, just no money.
Not clear direction either. So
no, that's true. That is true.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history, you'll be amazed. And I didn't until I became an adult and started voting. I was amazed at how many people were in one party until they ran. and they switched platforms and parties really quickly based on the aid that they were getting, or when you don't know those things growing up, and then you see it and you're like, wait, what? This guy was a Republican president for 16 years, but he used to be a Democrat, or vice versa, and it's like, But anywho, again, that's a whole nother show. Reviews on this presidency, and you can take the reviews in topic anywhere that you want to take it. I would like something, and this is the thing that I always try to do. I would like to see something that you feel that this administration has failed at, and something that you think this administration has succeeded at. And we'll work our way backwards. Let's start with Dave.
Oh, so now you're going to start with me, because I got nothing. I mean,
you didn't find nothing good or bad? You're just like,
I am sitting here and not really, I did not know I would be asked this question today.
You like to go last.
So I'm going off the top.
Look, Larry, Larry's falling out of the chair to answer.
Let him
Larry.
go.
I see when I started this question, your eyes like, yes, I've been waiting on this one, especially the failed part. I could see that, Larry. Go ahead.
Yes, I've got a lot of stuff that failed, and I don't have a single thing that they won on. Nothing.
Now, see, that's the thing. Hold on, I'm gonna stop you there. That's the thing that I always find impossible, no matter who is in office. Even if you distastefully hate Donald Trump with all the fiber in your soul, there's got to be one thing that was done correctly. Okay, so there, but I digress. Go ahead. Give me the one thing that's your burning issue that you feel that they failed at.
Well, the border.
Mhm.
We'll start with there. No, you don't need to go much farther than there. As long
Hmm.
as it's been going on, and they're still allowing it to continue the way it started, only because they're so pissed off at Trump that they wanted to get rid of all of his programs. Now, I'm not a fan of Trump, and but I tell you what, the Democrats they keep throwing charges at him. They're going to give him the election, and I can't believe they haven't figured out yet that what they're doing by charging with all this stuff is just making him stronger. You know, I'd like to see somebody else that could actually be a better president. And right now, I'm not. I mean, Trump would be certainly a better choice than Biden, but
Hmm.
I'm not sure he's the best Republican.
I'm sorry, I had a brain aneurysm when you said you'd like to see a better president than Trump. My brain froze for a second. Trying to be impartial, well, that was hard for me.
Well, no,
Mark,
Trump did some good stuff, and you know, I don't like the man personally. I think he's a jerk off, but he did. Uh, he put some good things together, and you got to give him credit for that. I can't think of a single program that Biden has put together, not one,
mhm.
that's comparable to anything Trump did that he won on.
I'm going to say three quick things, and I'm going to move on. One, I was talking about administration. A lot of times when we talk about administration, we go straight to the president. Number two, we got back into Trump, even though we were talking about Biden. And number three, if a person does not know anything that a administration has done good or bad, that's kind of on the person and not on the administration, because there's way too much information out there to find those things.
Oh, I can tell you things that he's done bad. I just can't tell you anything he's done good.
Yeah, but see, that's not an administration problem. That would be that person's problem. Because
Well,
if you can't find the good, that means you ain't looking.
Biden has an administration that's controlling him. He's not doing this stuff himself.
But we're talking about the administration. Go ahead,
Well,
Mark.
okay, well, he's got weird people running that place up there. And being an old guy myself,
Uh,
I can say, you know, Biden is not capable of controlling things.
the last two presidents haven't been capable, but that's my personal
Well,
opinion. Mark,
I would say, I hate to, because I'm inclined to agree with what you said about, hey, you know, you might need to look in the mirror at yourself. However, I would just say in his defense that maybe he has gotten too much blame for some of the things that have gone wrong, such as perhaps the situation in Ukraine, such as perhaps the situation in Gaza, and everything that goes wrong all of a sudden is the president's fault. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. But in terms of things that have gone wrong, I point to the economy. How much of that is reflection or should be on the president is debatable. Uh, but I think, though, that I would echo what he said about the border, Larry said about the border. But I think there's just a general perception of him being too old and too weak to do what needs to be done. And I don't think that's a partisan issue. And I think not many people talk about Trump's age, but in all honesty, whether you like Trump or not, he doesn't act as an old man like Biden does. And I wish that his handlers would they tried to get him to appear more active, more mobile, or riding a bike, and he fell off and so forth. One thing they should stop telling him to do is stop running, because he started running to places to make him look more youthful, more energetic. And I can tell you, as an old man myself, you really look old when you run. You're better off walking. So, uh, so don't you're not going to make yourself look younger by running. You just make yourself look older. But I think in terms of things that have just been gone wrong, I think that's his Achilles heel, is that he is perceived as weak and old, whether he's Republican or Democrat. I think I think his party knows that, and I think they know they might be in trouble because of that.
well, we already know being president ages you anyway. So if you already start off old, I mean, look at every president when they do that picture from how they look when they start to how they look
Yeah.
when they finish. But what's something that's positive?
Well, I don't so much as positive. I would just say that, well, some of his people like him, but I don't know that he's really excited the Democrats either. I don't. I think that a lot of people just really voted against Trump, but have never been that enthused about Joe Biden or Kamala Harris for that matter.
Well, what you said is interesting because a lot of people voted for Trump to vote against Hillary. So it's kind of like ever since Obama, we're doing this thing where we're just overreacting to
Yeah.
something else, and we've got to stop that trend. Harold?
Well, I mean, when I look at the bad things or bad thing, I would say, I think messaging has plagued him tremendously. You know, he's done some good things, and yet they don't communicate it to the masses, which leads to what? The masses embracing all the negative messages that have come out. For example, when I hear about his age, I'm thinking, okay, well, he's 3 years older than the previous president. And if age is an issue, the last time I saw the previous president in an interview, his breathing didn't sound like he was the picture of health. That's just facts, and that's on video. But then when I look at the good things, I think about the different legislation that's been recently passed. When you talk about infrastructure, when you talk about the Chips and Science Act, when you talk about a number of things that have been done, you ignore the things that have been done, all because you're focused on one area, the border. And I know the border has plagued every president. There's not one that's had a border.
That thing's been a mess before I was born, and I'm
But
45
that's
years old.
and that's my point. So it should be, if the messaging from the administration is correct, I would be saying, well, the border has been an issue for boom, 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 and this is what we envision trying to do to resolve the problem or solve the problem. Because the same people that complained about the border before never said anything about the number of corporations that were hiring undocumented people to go out and do the work to further what? Enrich them. So I find it interesting. But like I said, as it relates to the border, yeah, we're hearing about more encounters, which is a good thing. That means the border patrol is doing their job. They're capturing these individuals, reporting those numbers. And I don't think they're communicating who's being deported and how many, here, there, in other information that needs to be conveyed. But the point here for me is, when I look at the good and the bad, I think messaging has been the biggest problem for this administration, because you're not touting those things that you're doing that are making an impact. Even when I look at HBCUs, this administration has given more money to assist HBCUs and trying to help them elevate their campuses, their curriculum, their whole programs than any administration previously or prior to that. But when the previous administration did their, I guess, awarding of HBCU dollars, they made it a press conference. It was everybody in the White House. We got to have all of these, it became more of a photo op than an actual beneficial situation for HBCUs. And then you find out that particular situation was not anything that boded well for HBCUs. It had been something that had been done prior that was already in the passed by the legislation.
Say, Harold, what is
yes,
HBCU?
Historically Black colleges and universities.
Oh, okay.
I may be a fool, but I'm just of this belief that no matter where and I know this is stupid thinking, no matter where you align politically, you should be able to point out goods and bads, and you should be able to defend and attack when necessary. I'll give you an example. I've made no bones. I can't stand the last president, but I remember when people were coming at him because of the immigration situation in Miami and how deplorable it was. And people got mad at me. I said, wait, that's not a Donald Trump thing. I'm from Miami. That's been like that since, since before I was alive. It's been a mess. But I just don't think people possess the ability to give credit when they don't like someone and to give negative criticism when they're pro someone. And I think if we all did better at that, we could
Right.
come to more of a consensus of who's the better choice to run a country and all these other things. But I know that's silly. That's me talking about a perfect McDonald's world that doesn't exist. David,
Well, now that I've been sitting here, like, oh, okay, now that I think about it, I think you have to look. Like, what the hell
you know,
did you?
you know what, Dave?
And
Dave has the greatest seat. He gets to hear all your responses and then make his great educated
make it
response.
sound good. And
Yeah, then he embarrasses all of us
I
by
won't
doing
add
better.
anything new. I'll go. I think to understand what Biden did, you have to look at what Pelosi did, right? You have to see the legislative record and the legislation that went through about they had a whole bunch of different things they did. It was infrastructure and climate, and it was kind of confusing, but they put together a lot of legislation that was good. I think Biden's efforts, when you had the auto strike, right? You had a Democratic president going out and actually being supportive of the unions and that sort of thing. And I'm not traditionally a union guy, but there comes a point when you got to not make these things extinct. And so I thought he was doing better there. I think his foreign policy has been a better, and I would say his Ukraine policies are good and have been a bright spot if graded on a scale of how presidents do stuff and what you need to do. Um, and the border's been up there with Larry on that. The border is just an abject failure and an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. It may be an embarrassment to all presidents, but that is something. You can't blame the president or give the president too much credit for the economy, right? That kind of is independent of the president. They can have an impact, but frequently people do that. They'll be all like, Biden had inflation, or he brought it down, depending on who it is. I'm like, but the border is that's if you aren't in control of that as the president, that is something that you can, I think, bear responsibility for. So that would be I would agree with Larry as a signal worst event. But that's what that
The
was.
economy is one of those issues where you can never blame or promote the president, because the economy usually, what it is, usually started with previous or even previous administrations. And sometimes where you are in the economy was a process that started 6 years ago, not just 4. We always look at the last president. Sometimes it's 8 years ago. So that's one of those things that's hard to gauge on the person that is sitting in office at the time. Are we ever? I know I talked about the fantasy world I was in, and I don't know if we're ever going to get to a point where just hearing a particular person's name closes your ears to whatever they have to say or do.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
you said, Pelosi, and Larry's face looked like you shot his mother. Okay, before you even said what she did, and I'm not saying that to pick on Larry. It's just this thing of, we all went to school, we all saw debates. If you ever served on a debate team or learned to debate, they always made you argue both sides so that when you become an adult, you can understand how to hear both sides and make an assessment. And I just feel like uh, we get to this time in our lives once we start voting where we shut that off. If you're on the other side, everything you say is going to be wrong as soon as it comes out of your mouth, even though I haven't heard it yet.
Well, it's when you choose your side, and and so they're bad and we're good and all that. I call it a genetic fallacy, and that's criticizing an idea based on its source instead of its merits. But I think you made a good point about the economy, John, and how a president shouldn't be blamed or receive credit necessarily for the economy. But I think with respect to inflation, though, and gas prices, I think Biden made a strategic blunder the first day of office by shutting down the pipeline. Now, whether or not that had an effect on gas prices, I don't know. But I
It
believe
didn't.
that people's perception is that it did have an impact.
Well, so wait, here's a
Right.
good thing that you said, Mark, because
The
they only
perception's
did it.
reality.
Here's a good thing. When people listen to what everyone's saying and not independently learn how to dig and look. So he closed the pipelines, gas prices went up. Someone says, Gas prices have gone up because the pipeline was closed. Everyone runs with it. But then when they do the deep digging and finds out that's not the reason, it's not blasted as much as that's why.
No.
Well, that's more
We-
complicated. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we get cause and
Well,
effect.
no,
And
it's
especially-
actually not that complicated.
It's not that complicated. I feel like we don't do, once something comes out and then it's proven wrong, the follow up isn't as sexy as the outrage
Yeah, I
in
agree.
what was put out. And that's the
Well,
problem.
you tie
And
the pipeline. You tie the pipeline to emptying out the oil reserves.
Yeah, but
He
Dave's
did
gonna
not
explain.
empty out the oil reserves.
Yeah, it did it.
And
Okay.
They proved that
he-
wrong, Larry. Dave's gonna explain.
and
I don't know who they
some
is.
of the best analysis, you got to find Mr. Global out there. There's a guy who does this, who's an oil industry guy, and he brings the data, he brings receipts, and
No, we don't
part
want
of
data.
the reason that we had prices go up was that Trump had pursued policies that shut down investment, and you can follow the path of U.S. investment in drilling, that it cratered under Trump, and oil companies went out of business. And then after COVID, when the demand came back, they're starting to they haven't been drilling, and it caught them flat-footed. And so this was a case of what John was talking about. The decisions that affected the prices were not those immediate things that Biden did. They were things that Trump had done, that he touted doing, getting Saudi Arabia to change its production. But it had these impacts on the U.S. oil industry that were very negative, and were isolated within it. And so when you go, it takes a deep dive. So it is complicated in that you do have to go into the deep dive. But it's what John was saying about, hey, the decisions 6 months, 18 months ago are what affect you today. Yet our perception of them is cause and effect. Pipeline shut down, prices go up, right? And that leads into reason, much better than normally informed people. I'm looking at you, Mark, right? So I mean, you at least know we shut down the pipeline. A lot of people have no idea, right? But underneath it, there are these layers and these lags, and like you say, it's not sexy, right? to come back and say, well, no, it was actually this other thing that happened.
Well, when it comes down to people, but I think, I don't know if we're going to get into, okay, who's going to win next year.
Mhm.
But I say this, but people are pretty simplistic. And
Yeah.
if prices are going up, if they're having a harder time making ends meet, they're going to vote with their wallet, whether it's right or not. I mean,
Yeah.
as Bill Clinton said, it's the economy stupid, or as James Carville told him to say. Jimmy Carter got blamed for the state of the economy in the early '80s, and that's why Ronald Reagan got elected. So whether fair or not, and Herbert Hoover, going back to the '30s, he didn't cause the Great Depression, but he was president when it happened. So whether fair or not,
Voters don't have to be fair.
no, that'd be fair. But there's other wild cards and unknowns though,
Mhm.
that may have an impact on what happens next year. For example, is Biden's age really going to catch up with him? Is he going to suffer some really serious health crisis? The effect of these indictments on Trump, I don't think we know what's going to happen yet. Is that going to it's going to energize his base, like Larry said, it already has. But is it going to affect swing voters who think this guy's really guilty of something? They're going to go out and vote against him. Or is Trump being the nominee going to energize the Democrats? Because I don't think the Democrats are that energized by Joe Biden, but they're energized by Donald Trump.
This is true. They get more energized by Donald Trump. I just find comic relief point. I just find it funny how we went Clinton, Bush, Obama. We got younger, and now we're back to fossils.
That's very
the
interesting.
last two presidents.
Yeah,
we're back to
exactly.
fossils.
Awesome.
And in fact, John, not only that, some of the major contenders like Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, senior citizens as well. It's this kind of woke generation. How all the heroes are old people.
Yeah, and it's harder to change someone's. The older you get, it's harder for people to change their ideas.
I don't know that they're heroes to them. I mean, there is a lot amongst millennials, Gen Z, amongst the younger voters, there is this just very palpable antipathy towards the boomers, and in particular, uh, for holding on to power. And
Hmm.
there somebody was doing an analysis, or was on TikTok talking about the ages of presidents and how you know they got older and they stayed older, and they're like, look, these boomers just won't step aside. And Biden is just playing very much into that. Now, I don't necessarily agree with these people, these young folks saying this, and they're kind of blaming everything on the boomers. But I technically am at the tail end of the boom. I identify more with Gen X, and so I'm kind of like watching these guys going, "Oh, Jesus." But I think Dianne Feinstein, and Biden not stepping aside, Feinstein holding on to the very end. This is this thing of like, when are you going to let some young people in?
And Mitch
And so
McConnell.
I think you're seeing that amongst the younger voters, who are the ones who need to come out and vote for Biden if it's a Biden Trump thing, but they're pissed off about the age. And it's not just about him being too old for office, it's the fact of the boomers not stepping aside to allow the next generation in.
Because
Um,
every run up to presidential nomination, we see all these younger, fresher faces with ideas and all of these things, whether you agree with them or not, and then we end up with the 90-year-old people again at the end. So
But you have
continue
to also,
to them.
but you got to acknowledge that in that system, in our political system, there are certain people at the top that are going to what? Make sure certain individuals are in position to be the nominee, which leaves us less of a choice than we desire. Because
oh
again,
yeah.
you can come up with new and fresh ideas all day, but if older voters are voting, most of the time the parties are going to push candidates that those voters can connect to because they're more reliable when it comes to the voting booth.
But Harold, that didn't happen with Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. There were two newbies, relatively speaking, two young people. I mean, they
Yeah,
succeeded. Well,
but
I mean,
but they're more charismatic.
yeah, I
See,
don't. That's
but
what
I'm
my
saying,
question is, and I don't know the answer to this.
Well,
But why
I
haven't
agree
the
with
Gen
Mark.
Xers or people like that come up with their hero? They aren't there. I don't
Well,
know.
Mark, you're right what you
again,
just said,
employment.
because that's when I started voting, and that's what happened. That's why I made the joke of we got younger and younger. It got to the point where everybody got tired of the same old thing, and that's when you had Bill Clinton, and
Yeah.
then you had George Bush,
And
and
John
then you had
Kennedy.
Barack Obama, and now we've made this. I feel that's the overcorrection back the other way. But last thing I want to talk about, it kind of encompasses what we were talking about um, here. Hold on, I lost it. I had the person's question, and now, darn it, I think I deleted it because I thought I asked it already. All right, Dave, filibuster for 30 seconds.
Oh crap! I think though we have a very
Talk about tanks
you
for a
know we
while. Clusters. That'll.
what
I think
I
clusters
could be Jimmy
appropriate.
Stewart. You care about this country anyway. I we
Hold these two.
it ain't Mr. Smith goes to Washington anymore, right? I think we've got an interesting situation coming up with Biden staying in there. I sometimes am like, I'm not sure Biden's going to make it to, what happens then. You're almost at the point, though, I understand, where it's too late. That primary ballots and the names are on ballots. And so we're stuck with Biden. And as a running, there's no new person to put up. However, I try to remember where do the Democrats still have all those super delegates? Could we end up with a negotiated convention on the Democratic side at the end? Right, that's
Anything of
your
that.
fever dream, right? There's your fever dream of at the end of the day we get this negotiated convention, and those super delegates. I think they're still there. I think I'm trying to remember what they did with them, and they were there to prevent sort of a situation like we got somebody who's there that we don't really like, and Biden might not. He might be a lot older in a year. He might look a lot older in a year, and it is interesting to see Nikki Haley getting the Koch brothers support recently, and that Nikki Haley. It'll be interesting to see if the alternative to Trump can gain some momentum when Trump is, I think, very likely to be either we still have court cases on the 14th Amendment. We have, him getting indicted, him not going beyond indicted to convicted. There is still room for that to implode and to need your second person. And Nikki Haley coming up would be a fairly strong candidate. Sure, there's all the noxious social positions that a Republican takes, and they almost have to take that. But as a woman, not white, and younger, she checks a lot of boxes for people, and so she could be a real strong Republican candidate if they can get rid of Trump. I don't see it on the Democratic side that they have a Nikki Haley, though. That would be my thing. Who would be their alternative to Biden? I don't know. That was my filibuster.
I found what the guy was talking about.
There we go.
We did a Florida, 2 episodes on Florida. It was a person from Florida, and he said, I wish people would do more digging into what can happen when their political heroes make certain statements or said things. We've had the thing with DeSantis and Disney in Florida. We had all the people cheering DeSantis. But now that Disney has scrapped their $1 billion plan, and now that people have figured out Disney has a $40 billion impact on Florida, which helps us keep non-state taxes as a state of Florida, and he's been quiet on that, and it's been a disaster. Those people have no idea.
Who would have known that Disney has an impact on Florida?
But people don't do that. They get in there right fighting, and they pump people up, and they don't understand the impact because of nonsense that someone's spewing. But that's what we do in politics. We give you something to argue about, transgender stuff, and you get to argue about that while we screw everything up. But anyway, the person that has, I think, the best assessment of the political landscape are people who don't know anything about politics. I love to tell this story. My nephew, when he was 14, had to watch the debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump for an assignment in class. He knows nothing of the two people because he couldn't even pronounce their names right, and he doesn't do anything dealing with government and politics. So he asked me to watch the debate with him. I said, absolutely not. I'm going to be biased, even though I'm going to try not to be biased. So you watch it and you do your report. So while the kid watched the debate, the adult went in his room and played video games. I came out an hour and a half later.
Wait, you're the adult in this scenario?
Yeah, I'm the adult. I went to play video games because I didn't want to watch that tragedy. Right. So I came out an hour and 20 minutes later, and I've never seen someone look so miserable in their entire life. I asked him, what's wrong? He goes, this is stupid. I said, well, elaborate. What's stupid about it? He goes, the guy doesn't answer any questions and just makes fun of people. And the lady just sounds like she's saying, I know you are, but what am I? I don't even know what I'm listening to. And I said, you want to know what's even dumber? He said, what? I said, I have to pick one of those. And he goes, why? And I said, all adults ask themselves that question every time there's an election. So I just thought that was a funny story to tell because he was just over it after listening to those two talk.
I'll simplify it. I think that the term political science is one of the greatest oxymorons in English language.
Why do you say that? Wait, Dave's a political scientist.
Well,
I'm listening.
So is criminal justice. I mean, no, I'm not, and I'm certainly not knocking the people that study it. I'm just saying is that it's like jumbo shrimp or Civil War. The two things just don't add up: politics and science.
You're confusing political science with politics.
Okay,
totally different.
Well, but what I said sounds better.
I know it sounds. I know, but this is the crap I have to do.
It was my saying. Okay,
I told people I was going to be a political science. I told people I was going to be a political scientist. Oh, you're going to run for office? I mean, hell no. When you study political science, you hate those guys.
There you go.
You just universally despise them.
I don't think Dave, we got 6 minutes, but briefly explain, because I didn't understand that until I met you. That people think people who are in political science that they are trying to run for office or they're studying politics. What the hell is political science?
Well, I think the point is we study politics.
Mhm.
It is a social science. And the thing about anything that tries to dignify itself with the term science, I mean, there is something there, and it's that you come at the world and you say, look, there's causes and effects. We call them variables. And we try to find generalized relations between categorizable phenomena, like do nations that are democracies go to war with one another? So is there a relationship between the regime type of a country and its likelihood of going to war? Those are what I mean by generalizable phenomena, because every country's got a regime type and war is war, right? And then we get theories of, okay, this is why that may work one way or the other. And then we test them. We go out, we use data, we test the theories to see if they're right. So there isn't a he said, she said. We may have rival explanations, but we will do something and try to say, all right, is this right? And we never actually prove it. This is the philosophy of science, right? So that's how we approach things. The thing that makes that unsuitable for politics is that you try to go out and you have an idea and you test it, and you can be wrong, right? Frequently do research and go, oh, well, my original idea was bullshit. This is what the real answer is. You can't do that in politics. In politics, you pick a side and you're ride or die. That's why lawyers are the schoolhouse preparation for being a politician is to be a lawyer, because you learn to advocate for one side and generate the best argument for that side, and it's resolved in a competitive process. And so that's why the school, you see so many lawyers in politics, because the intellectual skills they learn are directly transferable. As a political scientist, I would always be trying to say, someone would pose a question and I would go, all right, well, let's look at that. Let's find out if that's right. And no one wants that.
And the reason why I asked you
The
that,
same thing applies to criminal justice, by the way. Same thing.
Yeah.
So
And the
social
reason-
science, and the idea that people that teach criminal justice and study criminal justice are staunch defenders of the criminal justice system simply is not true.
Right.
So
Yeah, because criminal justice is definitely social science.
yeah, but you're right, definitely though. You can't say, well, I'd like to try this idea out and see how it works, and then it bombs. Okay, fine. Then you can talk about it in some journal, all right, but somebody's political lifeblood hangs by that. They can't do that.
and I asked you to that because it played in to the comment that was said by someone. They said, I don't like it when they always accuse a politician of lying when they change their platform or idea once they're in office. Do they not understand that you might have an idea and a platform when you're running, but then once you're elected, you are privy to information that you weren't privy to before you were president or governor or mayor? So to sit in office and say, well, my idea now sounds stupid, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't want to upset my constituents, is dumb instead of just doing the right thing. That's the last comment I want to say, and you guys wrap up responding to that. And then
John Maynard Keynes was vilified for changing his position, and he looked at in one of these clubs in London, and he looked at the guy and says, "I change my position when the facts change. What do you do?"
The facts changed.
When the situation, like
I don't
got
think people think about that at all. The information that you're privy to when you're running for president is not the same information you're privy to once you become president.
And I may have garbled that quote, but he had that thing of like, no, I changed my mind. Shit changes. What do? You just keep saying the same thing,
No, I agree.
All right. Well, I thank you all for being here. Larry, thank you for being here. Mark, thank you for being here. Harold, thank you for being here. Well, you have to. It's your show. Same thing with you, Dave. I hope to see more out of you two next year. The conversation, guys, we talk about government politics a lot, but if you watch some of our older shows, it's not the only thing we talk about. Next year, we will be expanding and talking about more things, not just politics and government all the time, but this is the channel on Keone Productions to get that kind of information. And again, we love having different people on that have different ideas. We don't want everybody to agree with each other because that's simply just not how life works. Everybody's in agreement with that, right?
No.
But we but we can all
TikTok only gives me videos I like. I don't understand. Isn't that the way the world is?
No, we don't want everybody agreeing, so I just said